Welcome to my Let's Play Old Games, or Let's Play Crappy Games, or Let's Play Hard Games. I'm not quite sure how to name this series yet, but I'm going to play Clive Barker's Jericho. Maybe you already know the game, probably you do, that's why you're watching the video. Question is, why would I want to play Clive Barker's Jericho? Well, this game received scathing reviews at the time it came out. It had anything between 40 and 60 out of 100, and these reviews didn't really seem to be fair, because games at that time that received these kind of reviews were basically unplayable pieces of shit. And I downloaded Clive Barker's Jericho, played it, and I realized, well, this game wasn't an unplayable piece of shit. It sure was hard and was criticized for that, but still, it's actually a pretty nice shooter. And it's hard. Did I already mention that? The game really is hard, and you can check out some gameplay videos that I took the first time around I played the game, and I died a lot. And it took me quite a while to get through the game, like, I don't know, a day or two. I didn't really take time, but it took me hours. But at the end of the game, after I struggled all throughout of it, I suddenly grasped the gameplay. And the gameplay in this game is unique because you're playing with a squad of 6 people. And you can switch between these people, and all these people have different skills, different weapons, different powers that you can utilize. And I had a really hard time adapting to all of that. But at the end of the game, I finally got it. I realized how to play with this game efficiently and nicely and with style. So once I beat it, I replayed the game again, and that was something that I had never done before. And on my second playthrough, which I only did casually, it only took me like 4 or 5 hours to get through it, and it was actually fun. It was really nice. And I felt that the reviews didn't really showcase that. They seemed rather biased and imbalanced and unfair, and they didn't really mirror the game's real quality. So I always had the plan to re-review the game and actually check out the criticism of these other very bad reviews and deal with them, but I never got around to that. So I'd rather play it again and showcase its strengths and weaknesses in a tiny Let's Play. So, yeah, this is Clive Barker's Jericho. That is not the only Clive Barker game. In 2001, there was already Clive Barker's Undying. That was also a first-person shooter, and it was met with a lot of acclaim. But that game flew a lot of, or under a lot of people's radar, because for some reason it never really gained much market share. And probably, I'm not quite sure, but I also missed that game. I played it first, I think, in 2006. So the game was already 5 years old, rather old at that time. But I was pleasantly surprised because that game employed gameplay that we would only see later in BioShock. It was a first-person shooter set in the 1920s, and it dealt with you visiting a friend who lived in an old mansion atop a hillside next to a cliff, I think in Ireland or Scotland, and everything surrounded the occult. He went missing, and you tried to find him, and the house was populated by his rather strange siblings, and the whole atmosphere was rather, well, strange. Well, Clive Barker is a horror author. Maybe you've seen what's the horror movie? I forgot the name, with Pinhead and whatnot. You probably know it better than I do. So, yeah, he's pretty much acclaimed, and I actually prefer him over Stephen King. So, when I played Undying, I was actually really stoked how great the game was, and I was even more stoked to find out that only a year from then, Jericho would come out. And apparently a lot of people were. So the expectations were high, and well, apparently they hadn't been met, because Jericho was nothing like Clive Barker's Undying. In Undying you had a single character which could utilize all kinds of first-person shooter weapons, more ancient ones and whatnot. But you also had special powers, like in Bioshock. You could create shields and whatnot. I can barely remember. Probably I should play that game next because it's really great. But you could also travel through centuries. That was pretty unique. Oh well, I guess you already had that in Daikatana, but Daikatana was a piece of shit, and Clive Barker's Undying was ingenious. So, still, it was awesome. And you had the ability to see into the past. So, by using that ability, you could see what was happening at the exact location you were standing right at that time through ghost images. That was pretty clever. And it relayed the storyline in a very ingenious way. Well, then Jericho came out, and Jericho is different. Like I already said, you're playing with a whole squad of people. You're not alone anymore. And being together with a group of people takes away from, well, the effect of being scared. So the game was criticized for not being scary. And in fact, it's not really scary. But I have to say, not a lot of games scare me. I really have to think back. I mean, when Fear came out, I actually had hopes that would scare me. When Doom 3 came out, I had hopes it would scare me, but it didn't. I like the games, especially Fear. Fear is a great game, but the effects that they used were so old and so tired, and even Alma looked like the girl from The Ring. And The Ring was already a remake of the Japanese original Ringu from 1998, so it kind of was stealing from a movie who already stole from another movie, and that kind of made it tired. And also the effects that they used to scare people were rather, well, they were rather easy to predict. And especially if you think about how the game was constructed, you entered a level, and if you could hear radio chatter, then you knew you would be able to fight against real enemies, human enemies. And if you entered an area where there was no chatter, and maybe some disturbance in the force, or the light, or whatever, then you already knew, oh, they're trying to be scary here. And after you fought human enemies, you had like an 80% chance that the next area would be a scary one, so you were already prepared. There was no element of surprise here. Jericho is different in that regard because you do not have much variation here. You're going through the areas and fighting and fighting and fighting along, and you can't really catch a break. And that's a good thing because I think it kind of helps the atmosphere. The music is pretty nice. I found it to be very supportive of the atmosphere. So the music always gives you something. It always creates some kind of tension. And this tension is enough for you to always be on your toes. You don't necessarily have to be scared, but you're already kind of stressed out. And that is already quite good, quite entertaining, at least for me. Well, other people kind of expected jump scares, whatever. I don't know. This game doesn't really have many of those, and even if they are in there at some point, they're probably not really that scary. But that's not really a problem, and I wouldn't really criticize the game for that, except for the fact that the game was advertised as being scary. Or rather, not being advertised, but there were a lot of journalists who predicted a huge scare factor of the game after playing some preview footage. And the problem really is, even though this was their personal perception and expectation, which is not usually a good basis to actually review a game on, you just have to review what the game gives you, not what you expect of it. Unless it's a very common concept that you can actually expect, something like first-person shooter gameplay that just has to be there to qualify as a good first-person shooter. But horror elements, I don't know. But the problem is, even today, even 2015, you can go to Clive Barker's website and see citations of these pre-release reviews, statements where the game is advertised as being scary, and, well, it isn't. So the game has to actually bear the criticism for not being really scary. Well, that's not much of a problem for me, because if I want to be scared, I play other games. There are other games that are really scary. And you probably have your own scary games that scare the shit out of you. Why would you want to hang it up on Clive Barker's Jericho? Anyway, I like the game. A lot. Maybe too much. So, after I beat it the first time, I realized how I had to play it. I replayed it, I played through it, and I enjoyed the gameplay. And I realized, hey, I can play faster. I could probably even be more efficient because the game is making it easy to be more efficient. Each and every character has certain techniques, and those techniques allow you to basically kill an enemy with a single shot. It doesn't really matter which character you use. Alright, some might be a little bit faster, others might be a little bit slower, but other than that, the game is very efficient and pretty balanced. And realizing that gives you quite the opportunity, and I saw that opportunity and I thought, well, why don't I speedrun the game? And so, I think in 2008 or so, I actually started to speedrun the game. First alone, later on I was joined by a Polish guy that I met on a speedrunning website, and yeah, we ran the game and brought down the level times. At that time there was already a speedrun of the game on YouTube, which clocked in at 2 hours and 20 minutes, and that was way too long. Because before I speedrun the game, I went through a very casual playthrough, and I managed to get through the game in like 3 hours, and I saw the potential to go at least twice as fast. So the goal was to bring the game down to 1.5 hours, and we came pretty close. 1 hour 35 minutes was the last time, but we never released it. Problem was, I had a very crash-prone computer. My mainboard was defective, but I didn't know about that, so I got constantly blue screens of death. I could barely record a level without getting a blue screen, so this was out of the option. Also, my PC wasn't really powerful enough to capture and play the game. I could play the game easily with like 30 frames per second, stably, smoothly, but I couldn't record it. And also, I wanted to record it in HD, which was just the new fad at that time, and in 2008 my computer sucked pretty much. So, same goes for the other guy. He had an even older graphics card than I did, and so we were able to record the video in very low resolution and preparing level times and strategy and whatnot, but we never got around to record everything. And I don't think I ever will redo that. Maybe I do. Maybe I will. I'm not quite sure. But right now I don't have any motivation. But even though I forgot a lot about the gameplay and which characters I used and why and how to control them efficiently, I still have the strategy in mind, and I'm trying to showcase a little bit of that stuff here. Anyway, what do I like about the game? Well, first of all, the character design. It looks great. I mean, check out the enemies. They look like they've come right out of a nightmare. This is something that Clive Barker can do easily. If you checked out Hellraiser or Candyman, this is a design that you can see here that's totally out of this world. I also like Stephen King, but even if he was involved with the project, you couldn't really tell. I mean, I remember the movie Creepshow, where he wrote the segment, They're Creeping Up on You, which is about a guy living in an apartment where he seals himself in because he's afraid of bacteria and dirt and whatnot, and then cockroaches creeping. It was a nice little story, but you couldn't really tell that King was behind it. He kind of lacks a certain thumbprint. Maybe it's there in his books, maybe he has a certain style of writing that you can recognize, but in terms of movies, not so much. And same goes for horror design, monster design. You just can't really tell, oh, by seeing something, that is typical King. With Clive Barker, you can. In terms of monster design, Barker has a knack for disfigured heads, exposed flesh, and leather. Lots and lots of leather. You can see it right here in this game, but also Pinhead had a leather coat, and I think in Candyman also wore leather vests. But this game is not just a copycat of the styles Clive Barker used in the past. It actually pushes his designs forward, and yeah, in this game you can see lots of new attempts to evolve. For example, he's using a lot of zombies, rotten flesh, and whatnot. It's really interesting. I mean, even if the game doesn't give you anything, the monster design is really outstanding and very inventive. So you won't see any tired old designs like the usual zombies that you're maybe used to see. This game has something new to offer, and even if you don't like to play it, it's worth checking out the monsters if you're into that. Another thing about the monsters is the level of detail that the game shows. It is really nice for a game of 2007. I mean, BioShock had just been released 2 months earlier, and the first thing that I recognized was that the textures weren't really up to snuff, at least not when it came to HD gaming. They were rather mushy and lacked a lot of detail. They were even, and the game looked nice, but it wasn't really crisp. Jericho has its problems too, texture-wise. I mean, there are a lot of textures that seem to be rather low res, but there are also a lot of them that are worlds above those of BioShock. I mean, you only have to check those out of the enemies or those of your squad mates. Usually, the more lower res textures are those of walls, ground, stone. But everything that is organic seems to have a high-res texture on it, and that is pretty nice. Check out the level of detail on Rawlings. It looks like he has real structure to him. That is really nice. Also, the other guys that you can see from your squad, they're really detailed. This is something, okay, you could expect from such a game, but still, if I compare it to BioShock, the enemies weren't as detailed as you can see in this game, so there certainly is an element of quality here that was lacking from other games, at least in my opinion. And don't forget that Jericho was not a AAA title. It wasn't big budgeted. It certainly had a big name tied to it with Clive Barker, but then again, I think this was only due to the fact that he was involved, but still, they were only trying to milk his name because they didn't have any other means of bringing forward quality other than that. I mean, what did you know about the studio, which had no other game out up till that point? So the studio itself wasn't really much of a selling point. So the name of Clive Barker had to make do, and it did before, even though Undying wasn't really successful from a financial point of view. But they tried with this one. I also like the attack patterns of enemy. Right now, we're at a section where we're being attacked by mainly melee enemies. These big lugs here are suicide monsters. You have to shoot out the yellow pustules. If you manage to do that, they just fall down and explode. If you don't, well, and they get too close, they will actually detonate themselves, trying to kill you and your whole squad. And if you're unlucky, they actually can take out most, if not all, of your squad. So, yeah. The cool thing about this is it also showcases the many ways you can take them out. For example, right now I have a shotgun, machine gun combination type weapon. So I can use the machine gun to shoot out the pustules, or I can use the shotgun to actually headshot them and take them out. This gun is actually one of the most powerful weapons in the game. That is pretty cool, because with a headshot you can basically take out all the lesser enemies. And that makes the game quite simple, if you know that. I mean, when I was speedrunning, my Polish friend actually wasn't even aware of the fact that the suicide monsters had heads that you could headshot. You had to find that out. And as you can see right here, the game is pretty dark, so that probably didn't really make it easier that much. So playing this game with your monitor having turned off, turn up all the backlight to the maximum is basically a must.
I've also detected something coming through it.
You know the drill, guys. Form up and move out.
Funny thing is, even though I've played the game a couple of times, even though I've speedran it, I have such a bad memory for level design. Right now I don't know where to go. I'm not quite sure. I'm waiting for the door to open. There is no button to interact with the door. So, well, you just have to wait. But nothing seems to happen, so let's backtrack a bit. And see if something else has opened. Ah, yeah. That's the exit. I mixed that up. That happens from time to time. So, I like the texturing. Lots of people, though, don't. There was criticism that the game looks too bland, way too grayish, brownish. And, yeah, there's a point to that. The game has a very limited color palette, as you can see here. I mean, after all, you're in a desert, and later on, well, you're still in some kind of run-down area from the past. So this is something that you have to showcase. And I think the developers actually achieved that. Sure, the game isn't as colorful, but then again, do you really want it to be that colorful? It kind of reminds me of Mirror's Edge. When I started it first, it looked really bright, really colorful, and really nice, but after like 2 levels, that wore out quickly. So I don't really need that. Also, I mean, there are other games that include a little bit of variation, like Half-Life 2, for example. You're starting out in City 17, which is pretty bright, at least in the beginning. Later on, you get to Ravenholm, which is very dark. Well, you're there at night, so... But still, it's a scary place due to all the monsters and zombies. And when you make it back out to the open, into the light, it feels like an area that you want to stay. It feels safer. Probably the better example would be Alan Wake, where outside in the woods you're actually being chased by demons and ghosts and whatnot, and all you want to do is just get out of there into the next safe zone. Well, you don't have that in this game. You're constantly under pressure. There's always an enemy around the corner, and there's no really safe haven for you. And probably this is also part of the horror element here, because it increases tension. If you knew that you were safe, well, wouldn't be much of a tension anyway. And in this case, well, you have to make do with that, and I actually like that. Let's talk a little bit about the way you can survive in Jericho. First of all, dying is not such a bad thing here. If you go down, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game ends, because you can be revived. Same goes for your teammates. If one goes down, you can revive them. Just walk up to them, hit the space bar, and you're all set. If you go down, there's only one other character that can revive you or other teammates, and that's Rawlings. That's the priest. If he goes down, you should actually pay attention to that and revive him. Luckily, your teammates will let you know. Whenever somebody goes down, there's always somebody informing you about that, about who just went down. And if Rawlings' name comes up, you better react, because if Rawlings is down and you go down, well, then the game ends. As long as one of you two is still alive, the game still goes on. Your teammates will go on fighting, and you will stay down until you're being revived. And if several teammates are down, then Rawlings will survive you first. So if he's just reviving somebody, then you will be next in line. This is rather clever, but still you have to pay attention, because it is very easy for him to go down. He's not the strongest character. He's also not the weakest, but still the fact that he can revive people actually probably caused the developers to make him a little bit weaker than the other guys. But that's okay. You can make do with that. Sometimes it makes sense to sacrifice one of your teammates. For example, oh, this is nice. This is a good example. So, no, we both died. Apparently, Rawlings just stood right next to the suicide bomber when he exploded, just as I did, and since we both went down, it didn't really matter that there were a couple of other guys. Since we couldn't revive, that was it. As you can see, the game uses a checkpoint system. And I fucking hate checkpoints. Checkpoints have no business being in a PC game. I mean, I understand checkpoints from a console point of view, because memory in at least older consoles was expensive. Memory cards couldn't hold that much memory, so using a checkpoint where you only had to store the checkpoint ID and probably some minor inventory was a rather sweet way of allowing people to save. But on a computer, there's no reason to use checkpoints. I mean, I don't even know why this became an issue. When games started out, there was no checkpoint system. I remember playing Doom and I was able to save anywhere. That made the game easier, or at least a little bit less frustrating, because when you died you only had to replay the part since your last save game, and if you save regularly, that could be kept to a minimum. So that was okay. But in other games with checkpoints, you never know where the checkpoint actually is located. I remember in 2003 when Far Cry was released, one of the best games ever. Far Cry used a checkpoint system, and that sucked. I played the game when it came out, the very first version 1.0. So it not just was a hard game, it offered like a dozen difficulty levels, and the game is hard. Like, if you remember the one level where they kick you out of a helicopter and then only give you a machine gun with 10 bullets to make it to your next weapon, while you're out on an island with enemies that can kill you in like 2 hits, at least on the hardest difficulty, that is hard. And that sucked ass. But not just that, because of all the bugs, the game could crash or something could go wrong, and the only way to actually fix that would be to load the last checkpoint, and the checkpoints were really few and far in between. It would take ages. The checkpoints really span a whole wide area, and it was frustrating to the point where people complained to Crytek in the forums. And Crytek eventually listened, thankfully, and with the last patch they released for the game, or with one of the last patches, they introduced a proper save feature, quick save and all, and that made the game a lot more fun. As for Jericho, I take it this was a console part. I'm not quite sure. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was only ported to the consoles after the game came out for PC. I don't know. I don't care. Checkpoints still suck. Also considering that this game came out for the Xbox 360 and PS3, and if I'm not mistaken, those consoles do have hard drives. So there's no reason to resort to checkpoints. Anyway, they're still bearable. This is probably one of the few positive examples, because after every fight, there's basically a checkpoint. Once you kill the enemies, your ammo replenishes, and your game is saved automatically. As you can see, I died at least one time. I lost probably a minute of progress. That is still okay in my book. It's still repetition, and I hate repetition, but that's okay. I would really hate it if I would have to replay like 10 minutes, or 15 minutes, or 20 minutes. Like, hello, Far Cry 4? 20-minute intro that you cannot skip? That's not good. And people don't like that. So Jericho kinda gives us, well, it's okay, it's bearable, I can live with that. So let's talk about the storyline for a second here. What is this game all about, or how does this storyline differ from other first-person shooters? Well, it's actually rather unique, because there is an evil in this world. It's called the Firstborn. It's actually the little child that we saw in the very first level when we landed here. And the Firstborn has been trapped in a box spanning several centuries of ancient times. And the problem is, it is breaking out. And yeah, well, we have to try to prevent that. The only way to do that, and this is actually the point where we realize that, is from within.
What the fuck is that?
There we have the Firstborn appearing.
Ross, don't go.
The only way to release is to set me free.
Yeah. He wants you to set him free, only for the better of the world, I'm sure. But in reality, we have to get into the box to actually close the breach. That's why we were flown out here into the desert. And this is where the breach appears right now. Look at the architecture. Doesn't it look nice, with all the lighting and everything? When I first saw that scene, I was really impressed by realizing this isn't a pre-rendered cutscene. This is rendered in real time. Look at the detail, look at the animation, look at the character design. This is just gorgeous. Even for 2015, this still looks nice.
Ross! Oh, shit!
Rawlings, get over here!
Hold on, Ross!
Damn you, Ross! Don't give up!
Come on, damn it! Come on!
Now we're in the point of the story where I'm dying.
Frank, help me!
So, Leech, which was my arch nemesis, who was weak enough to be lulled in by the Firstborn, ripped me to shreds, and just as I'm dying, my soul is jumping into Delgado, that huge
Oh my God.
piece of meat that we just saw.
What do we do now? Everyone, follow me! Come on! There's the breach!
Yeah, let's flee into the breach. So now the game is getting interesting, because I'm allowed to use my squad mates and their weapons and their
Is
abilities.
everyone here? No, we're not all here. We lost Ross.
I'm still with you.
What?
There's someone in there with him. I can feel it.
Delgado, can you hear me?
Rawlings, it's me, Ross. I don't know what happened. I think I'm in him. Put those
Yeah,
away,
that's
damn
funny.
it.
Look, I'm still alive.
Prove it.
You were just mourning me, and now you realize part of me is still alive, and the first thing you do is shove two guns in my face.
Where's
Isn't that
Frank?
nice?
What have you done with him.
He's still
I don't know if
Just
Clive Barker actually wrote this little skit. It doesn't make any sense.
We saw you die. Leech killed you.
not all of me.
Fascinating.
Yeah, not all of me. Fascinating. Yeah, well, yeah, sure.
Can you do that for me?
Alright.
Let's see.
Okay, I'm going to believe you. That's some pretty quick character development. Alright, now I can choose into which character I want to jump. I have to choose Black,
Abby,
which is a woman with a sniper rifle.
I hate this. Get out.
She has the magical ability to use telekinesis, which is cool enough to clear rubble, but also push back enemies or set them on fire. Some enemies actually start to burn when you use telekinesis on them. Pretty damn cool, but you don't know that. You have to find that out yourself, and that's part of the fun of playing this game. The sniper rifle itself is also pretty damn cool. One headshot usually means one kill. You have a nice scope, but in the hectic of all the fighting, you usually don't get to use that much. But the coolest thing about that is that the primary function is actually an underslung rocket launcher. You only have 10 rockets, so during a skirmish you better make it count and you hit. Problem with this game is the hit detection.
talk to Frank?
I
That sucks.
know what
You really have to hit enemies point center, or else the rocket or even shots have a good chance of just going right through the enemy.
that place was
And that really, that is frustrating. And this can happen quite a while, quite often. And I don't like that. And that is something that the game can be criticized for.
If you need my blood,
Oh well.
give it to me.
Right now we have to switch character.
Screw up, or you'll have to deal with Frank.
Now we have switched into Abby. She's the weakest woman in the game. Oh, not just the weakest one, the weakest character in the game. But she has some incredible, interesting weapons. One is a very weak submachine gun, and the other is a rather powerful katana. But her magic is also pretty interesting because she has the ability to use her blood to create a ball of blood that can trap enemies. And that's what we are going to do now. It can trap up to 3 enemies, and of course the problem is if there's a 4th one like this guy, we have to fight him. And yeah, now she's dead. Since she's already so weak, and using the blood magic actually drains her blood, it hurts her. That means that even though no enemy has hit you, you're already on the brink of dying when you use the blood magic. And that means you better evade any kind of enemy, any shot, any damage, or else you're going to go down. Alright, I think I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to say thanks for watching, and see you next time. Have a good one.